So, what's your story? I asked this new student I just met at the rooftop of Highland. How much time do you have? I don't have classes, doesn't matter. Then he proceeded to telling me about a story of the civil war that had broke out in his home country, Lebanon, and how he founded a nonprofit that bridged communication gap between Muslim and Christian youth groups. And later, he told me about a story of a near-death experience that brought him to question the meaning of life. Mind you, that was day 3 of week 0. Up till that point, every conversation I've had with new students I met at the GSB were either about the jobs before GSB or where they traveled the summer before. But that afternoon, the two of us had a 3-hour conversation. That person, Habib, as many of you know here in this room, is now my boyfriend. That's the power of storytelling. Story let you into the window of someone else's life. Stories allow us to convey ideas that cannot be simply expressed by words. Storytelling can be learned. What I had just illustrated were 2 techniques of storytelling. We all know, first impression is everything. During your interview process, the first 15 seconds, your interviewer has already decided whether they're going to hire you or not. The first word you say to your audience during a presentation is going to determine how they perceive you for the rest of the presentation. The second technique I used, parachuting in. You see, I didn't tell you that I was going to tell you a story about how I met my boyfriend. I just told you the story and drew you into the conversation. And during that 3 hours of conversation I had with Habib, he didn't describe who he is. He didn't tell me, what he is as a person, but I learned from his stories, his personality, his character, and his values. So don't wait. Let your story speak for you.
It was 2 in the morning when the doctor came out from the surgery room and said to my sister, "Let's just pray and hope for the best, because it's far worse than what we expected." My sister then burst into tears and wondered whether I will still be alive. A week earlier, I hiked one of the highest mountains in my country. By the time I had to climb down, I vomited and felt a terrible pain in my stomach all night long. The next day, I had to walk very slow because every step that I took, I felt like being stabbed with a very sharp knife right in my stomach. It wasn't a simple climb down because I had to climb for another 8,000 feet before I was finally able to descend from the mountain. That day, I took 12 excruciating hours just to finish a trip that's supposed to be done just within 6 hours. This story is similar to our real life. We expect something, but we couldn't control the situation. However, I want to tell you this. Your outcome depends on how you respond to your situation. So back in the mountain, I wish that I had my pain gone, just like that. But that wasn't the story. So I controlled my response by managing my expectation, telling myself to be more persistent, and keeping my feet to move one step at a time toward my goal. Now, the first time I told this story to my teammates, I spent more than 7 minutes because I gave too many details. And that will get the audience lost, or even worse, get bored. On the other end of the spectrum, if we gave too few details, then the audience may lack the context to grasp the meaning of our story. Therefore, we have to apply the Goldilocks principle, which is to present just the right amount of details to convey a compelling story.
I was very anxious. I was nervous. The room felt really cold, but my palms were still sweaty. I sat there, gripping the armchair. Not even on my phone. Not even on the internet. Just waiting for what would come next. The secretary finally said, "J.C. Fischer, the dean will see you now." So I walked in, took my seat across from our dean at his desk, and I waited. For what felt like an eternity, before finally he spoke. He said, "JC, we'd like you to give our graduation speech this year." I was elated. It was awesome. I had worked so hard for 4 long years to be the one to take my classmates' experience and convey it to our friends, to our family, and to our other classmates who would be there from different schools. Unfortunately, it wasn't the greatest graduation speech. It was solid, but unremarkable, and probably only remembered by me. In large part because I didn't tell stories, and I didn't use a couple techniques that we'll talk about now. One of those is one person, one thought. As I stood up on stage, gazing over the basketball stadium, I just kind of looked out. I didn't connect with any one person. I didn't share a moment with you, or you, or you. But doing so, as JD has taught us, lots of details go into it, you can really connect more powerfully with the audience as a whole by giving a few people that one moment. Now, it's not always easy to spend 4 to 7 seconds or to really potentially build a connection. But I have 2 tricks that have helped me build this skill. One is that feelings are easier to do than thoughts. It's easier to share a moment that's charged with emotion with another person. And the second is that a friendly face, who you smile at and smiles back to you, gives you the ability to easily move to the next person with more confidence and less anxiety. Now, you may have noticed the second technique I tried to use, which is that silence is extremely powerful. I started, you all drew your attention inwards. I even saw those of you on a laptop giving feedback pause and look up and make eye contact. One of the other things silence can do is give the audience time to fill the space. You may have all the lines of your story, but they need to fill the spots in between. It also can punctuate particularly powerful emotion, like anxiety or nervousness. And it can convey a meaning that words just don't do enough justice. For instance, waiting an eternity, to the point that it might be uncomfortable how long the silence lasts. So when you go out and tell your story, don't forget to weave some of these things in and use them to really create more impact with your words.
When Andy decided to apply to business school, I started for the basics. I did some research, and I studied for the tests, the GMAT and the TOEFL. Yes, as an international student, I have to take 2 tests before even thinking about applying to business school. Luckily, I got good scores in my first attempt. That was it. I was getting in. End of the story. The GSB, HBS, and Chicago were going to beg me to come to their programs. But that was far from the truth. I had a lot of work to be done yet. I had to prepare essays, prepare interviews, and convince admission officers that I was a suitable candidate for an MBA. I remember feeling pumped. I really wanted to get over this. I wanted to get done with this job and go to my MBA. But when I sat down to write the first few words of my essay, I hit a wall. A big, thick, and solid wall. I realized that I didn't understand American mindset. I didn't know how to sell myself. I felt that I didn't have the work experience or the extracurricular activities in my resume to convince anybody. So I decided to look for help. I contacted every person that I knew that had survived this process in the last year. I hired an advisor who provided me with examples of book writing. I went to every blog that I could find. And suddenly, that big wall wasn't as thick as I thought. I was going to be able to drill a hole and to get to the other side. In the next month, I was able to write 6 essays and prepare 2 presentations. Luckily, I got interviews invites from every school that I applied to. And a few weeks later, I got acceptance letters from the GSB, from Harvard, and from Chicago. Although nobody begged me to come here, the hole that I was able to drill into this big admission process is one of the biggest accomplishments of my life. Now that I've told you a story, I want you to focus on the wall that I mentioned. What does the wall mean to you? For me, the wall was this feeling of don't know where to start, of being frozen, of being paralyzed. And I'm pretty sure that for you it meant the same. That's because the wall is a very well-known analogy to all of you. And that's the power of poetry and analogies. That we are able to transmit very complex ideas with very few words. But we have to be careful with one thing, though, when we're using analogies and poetries. We have to know our audience. We have to be sure that they are getting what we're trying to transmit. Being that said, I invite you to use analogies the next time you tell a story. They're going to help you to be more successful and more concrete with your ideas.
They were going to tear down our homes. Our homes filled with love, warmth, and comfort. My neighbors and I marched hand in hand to the town hall meeting. We wanted to hear what they had to say. So a senior person on the planning team came by. She started with, "It's going to be a beautiful project. We are going to have beautiful housing for graduate students. There might be a theater, hot tubs, popcorn. All this in 2021. We were not impressed. We were not going to be there in 2021. We had bread and butter issues. We were concerned. Where are we going to live? That's how the presentation started. And as the speaker droned on, you could see the obvious disconnect with the audience. In every message and in every story, it is crucial to know your aim. You need to understand your audience, your intent, and the message. In this case, there was a clear disconnect in the speaker's understanding of the audience. And even though her intent was very clear, she wanted us to support the housing project. Her message was beautiful, it was going to be a beautiful place. But her message fell, unfortunately, on deaf ears. If your intent is muddled or fuzzy, it can have a different effect, whereby your message may be perceived as being selfish or inauthentic, even though you have the best intentions. And finally, if the message is diluted and unclear, it might just create a situation where you're just making unconstructive noise. So audience, intent, and message really form the foundation of telling a successful story. Today, we have put together 7 key principles of storytelling. These principles are important so that storytelling is not merely a clever way of putting ideas together, but truly an art.